Now a little bit of history. The old cabalist master had known well in advance about his coming stroke, and so shortly before it was to happen, he made a last-ditch effort to force God's hand and usher in the Redeemer. The old cabalist was convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that ours were messianic times, which to him meant that we were all about to be lifted from the quagmire of the human condition, and the Jewish nation was to be restored to its biblical glory. In the modern era, the title Kabbalist Master, or simply Master, refers mostly to a teacher of methods of connecting to the transcendental. A small region in Belarus spawned a dynasty of Kabbalist masters who arrived in the US in the 1940s. The last of the line was known as the Great Master of Brooklyn, or simply our Master. The movement he headed was known as the Knowledge of Channeling Cosmic Wisdom. The Grand Master's great achievement was his resurrection of faithful Jewish life after the European Holocaust of 1939 to 1945. His thousands of emissaries settled around the globe in knowledge houses, seeding new Jewish enclaves and reviving old ones. Like their master, they were aggressive and unabashed about reaching all the millions of Jews who remained alive after the Nazi defeat. One of the old master's favorite sayings was that we had to learn from every human being, including even from the Gestapo. Just as those murderers were relentless in their pursuit of the Jewish victims, so should we be out to embrace every last Jew in the world. On a Thursday afternoon one spring, he came out of his chamber after the evening prayer and announced that he was going to speak to his followers. A minor storm ensued, with officials running to assemble the devout and connect the loudspeaker system. Soon several thousand men of all ages, most of them in black suits and hats, many sporting bushy wild beards, were packed like sardines in the great hall in the Crown Heights section of Brooklyn. Thousands more were watching a live broadcast of the event via satellite. Before his followers had a chance to settle down, the master burst out in a painful moan which turned into a scream like a river of anguish that flowed out of the old man on the dais and threatened to drown his listeners. It is difficult to convey in words the spastic quality of the master's cry. There was some crackling hoarseness to it, and there were specks of red-hot ire, but mostly it was like a stream of molten lava cutting through an iceberg. If now is supposedly the time of redemption, why aren't we redeemed? The master hollered. The thousands of his followers in the huge hall and the thousands listening at home were thoroughly familiar with the Kabbalist writings about the coming redemption. Nothing he had ever said on the subject sounded remotely like this. Can it be imagined, the master demanded, that wherever 10 Jewish men are assembling in prayer, they would not be crying to high heaven, insisting that God send down the Messiah immediately? Is it possible that groups of Jews are getting together and they're not even mildly upset because the Messiah wouldn't come tonight, nor tomorrow, nor the day after? Isn't it clear that if a single group of 10 Jewish men anywhere on God's great earth were to beg for a Redeemer, with even the pretense of sincerity, salvation would have long been with us? He cried and pounded the table before him with his fists. His audience was in silent shock. No one dared turn his eyes away from the master on the dais. You are all nothing but a bunch of fakers, the master accused his listeners. Book learning, lip serving, mammon worshipping, chicken munching, good for nothing heaps of human waste who don't care diddly if the world is saved from its state of perpetual misery or not. And again he pounded the dais. And if you are all fakers, what does that make me? He yelled. I'm no better than you. I'm a fraud, a has-been, washed out, finished. I'm a joke. The silence that followed was so intense, several hundred of the assembled men fell asleep out of sheer fear. Others became permanently wide awake, as if they'd been told the truth of such cosmic dimension. Their lives were now imbued with a new sense of purpose. This is how the first messianic crazies, the scourge of the cosmic wisdomnic movement, were created. Look at us, we're so pitiful, the master roared, examining the thousands of anxious faces in his audience. Their obedient silence was driving him to the brink of real anger, not the kind you use as an educational tool, but the kind your doctors warn you about at the end of an electrocardiogram test? Why was everybody so subservient, for crying out loud? Had he raised a flock of useless sheep? When had he ever told them staring downward silently and waiting for Master's rebuke to be over was a quality worth pursuing? He sighed in anguish. We're all still in exile, he told them in what sounded pretty damn close to resignation. And worst of all, it isn't just our physical exile. Even in our spiritual work, we are remote, abandoned, lost. Then he told them to go do something constructive to bring the Messiah. What a shame, he concluded. We're going to be just another failure on the list. The movement was nearly destroyed as a result of this dramatic appearance. Some followers were convinced the Master had declared that he himself was the Messiah and was ready at any moment to redeem the world. Others also thought the Master was the Messiah, but didn't think the best strategy for the time being would be to grab humanity by the lapel and scream this message in its face. And the Master himself, what did he have to say on the matter of his being God's messenger of redemption? Not much really. He was preparing himself for the worst part of his life, to be followed by his